Hey, what's up you guys, it's Connor, and today I'm going to be starting my 2020 reading wrap-ups. I've decided that I'm going to lessen the number of books that I talk about in each video because I don't like editing such long videos. I can just do 5 instead of 10, and then I don't have to wait as long, and I don't have to put it off. So we'll see if this works out better. Today we're going to be talking about the first 5 things that I read in 2019. This is going to be comics and graphic novels as well as novels. If you guys don't know, these are the videos where I do shorter miniature reviews of all the most recent books that I've read. I am, again, behind already in 2020, so we're going to try to catch up. The first thing that I read in 2020 is actually a comic book. I read The Wiccan and the Divine Volume 6, which is the Imperial Phase 2. If you guys don't know, this series was popular on BookTube a couple of years ago, and people have petered out over the years, but I am trying to finish this year. Anyway, in this comic book, every 90-ish years, 12 gods are reawoken in the bodies of young people, so people are just living their lives and then they randomly are a god. The way that it works is that they have 2 years to live it up, to be worshipped, to be hated, and at the end of the 2 years, they are all dead. The series is a lot more complicated than that. There are a lot more things going on behind the scenes, and throughout the comic book series, you figure out who's pulling the strings, what's been going on, characters are taking sides, and it's just become a huge mess. At this point in the series, I'm still absolutely loving the art style. If you make it to volume 3 and you don't like the art style because there's a guest artist, or a few different guest artists, push through that because the art goes back to the original people. But I love the art in this. I love the coloration in this as well. I love how vibrant it is. I will say though that I think that this comic book stretched out a little bit too long. I know the last volume is volume 9, I believe. And at this point, only at volume 6, I'm like, I think it's time for this to wrap up and be done. It's starting to get to that point where it's getting a little too ridiculous, but I did really enjoy the ending of this one, so hopefully that continues for the next few volumes as I am trying to finish this up. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars because I enjoyed it, but I'm not fully loving this series anymore. But again, I'm excited to finish it up at some point this year. The next book that I read is The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. This is actually a collection of short stories slash fairy tales that take place within the Grisha verse, which is Leigh Bardugo's big world that she's written most of her books in. The original trilogy was the Grisha trilogy, and then there is the Six of Crows duology. So these stories that are in this book are stories that people would tell their children to teach them life lessons or to warn them against doing certain things, or you know, all that kind of stuff. It definitely is very reminiscent of some of the things that you'll be familiar with, like the Grimm fairy tales and everything like that, and they have a similar vibe where the stories are darker. They do not end happily often. And so because that's kind of the vibe that I think that she was going for, I think that this book does that extremely well. I thought that the book was really well written as well. It definitely captures that fairy tale, fable-esque tone, and I found myself really enjoying some of the stories. Some of them were not my favorite, but that's just kind of what you get when you get a bunch of different stories in one book. I think that if you're a fan of the Grimm fairy tales and everything like that, as well as a fan of her Grishaverse and those books, then I think that this is something that you'll really enjoy because you'll understand some of the ways that the people in this world are taught certain things. And there was also one story where I was like, is this the Darkling right now? So I definitely enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I think it does exactly what Leigh Bardugo wanted it to do, and I enjoyed it. I think that I will probably revisit some of the stories in the future just because at this point in time, like it's only been a month or something, and I'm forgetting some of the details of some of the stories. So it's definitely one that hasn't fully stuck with me completely, but I did really enjoy it while I read it. And I think my favorite story was the one about the hunter and the animals like outsmarting the hunter and everything like that. I really liked that story. After that, I read a graphic novel called The OK Witch by Emma Steinkellner. This graphic novel follows a girl named Moth. At the beginning of the book, she definitely feels like an outsider, and at the very beginning of the book, she finds out that there is a reason why she's actually a witch. And throughout the course of the story, you're following Moth as she's figuring out what that means, as well as trying to protect herself, trying to protect the people that she loves. I thought this story was really cute. I really enjoyed Moth. She just has my heart, basically, and I really enjoyed seeing her go through the process of everything that's happening in this book. This graphic novel also has a very, almost like web comic vibe to it. Like the art style seems very webcomic-y to me, which is not a problem. I was enjoying the art, but if you like webcomics, I think that you'll also like this as well, at least stylistically wise. My main complaint with this is that I felt like the plot moved way too quickly, which I know that graphic novels and comics, the plots tend to move very quickly, but in this one it felt like an entire series or season of a TV show was squished into one volume, and so you didn't get to like tease out as many things as I think could have been. I definitely could have seen this individual book as a series because there are so many different things that it tackles. I would have liked the first book of Moth's story to really just be about her figuring out that she's a witch and coming to terms with that and trying to figure out how her powers work and everything like that, but it moves so fast that that's just one portion of it, and then it goes through a crazy cascade of events and tons of things that she's having to deal with all very, very quickly. So I think that it was a bit rushed. I did enjoy it, but because it was so rushed, it was harder to connect with her and her story. So I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. Still really enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed Moth and learning about her and her family. I think that this story was more nuanced than I was expecting it to be, which was great. And so I do definitely recommend this one if it sounds interesting to you, but it just wasn't one of my absolute favorites, I guess is what I'm saying. After that, I read Blood Witch by Susan Denner. This is the third book in the Witchland series, but there is also an in-between book, like a 2.5 book that you should read before you continue on and read this one. So kind of the fourth book. In the Witchland series, you focus on different characters for each book. That's why the books are called different things. Like the first book is called Truth Witch, that follows mainly a girl who's a truth witch. She can tell when people are lying or not. In the second book, it's called Wind Witch, and it follows mainly a guy who can control the wind. In this one, it's called Blood Witch because it's following a character who is able to do blood magic, and he can smell people's blood from really, really far away and track them. I guess I should say that in this world there are different types of witches. There are a ton of different types of witches, and also within each type of witch there are also different abilities that come with that. So like 2 people could be wind witches, but they have slightly different powers, which I love. In this one, I felt like the scope of the novel and of this series has really ramped up a lot. You follow a lot more characters than just the Blood Witch, Aedouin. I don't know how to say his name. Because this book is about Aedouin, it also has a lot of Assault, who are my favorite 2 characters in this series, so I was really loving that. But on top of them, you also follow a lot more characters. You continue to follow characters from the other books, so you continue to see Safi and you continue to see what's his name? But 2 of my favorite characters that we got to follow in this were actually Venice, and Vivia, which are 2 different people that are high up in their respective like countries. I thought that they were so interesting, especially because they were both trying to approach balancing a life of being such a high-ranking member of their societies with also having a life of their own, and I really loved seeing that. I really loved seeing how different they were, but how similar they were as well. I also started liking the main character of the first book a lot more in this. I didn't really love her all that much, and that's why I didn't think that the first book was as good, but I'm starting to like her a lot more, Safi, the Truth Witch. So I think that this had a lot of character growth, but I would say that this book is not super plot heavy. There is a lot of stuff that happens, don't get me wrong. It's definitely a book that is more about moving the chess pieces into place for the future of the series. So there's a lot of gearing up in this. There's a lot of characters exploring their respective powers as well as their own individual situations. The world conflict is slowly starting, and the characters are scrambling to try to figure out their own stuff before that happens. And so I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really entertaining. I really loved learning about all the characters in this, especially about the ones that I already talked about. And I do think that this series is a bit underrated on BookTube. I don't feel like as many people are reading it and talking about it as maybe there should be. So I definitely hope that you guys pick it up, because at this point in the series, I am fully invested in all these characters in this world. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. fantastic. I think my favorite is definitely that in-between volume because I listened to the audiobook and I thought it was amazing, but this one is so good as well, and I'm so excited to continue with this series. And the fifth book that I read is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This book was picked as the January pick. We actually already did that live show, so I will leave a link down in the description to it if you want to check it out. In there, friends and I just basically talk about the book, our pros, our cons, how we felt about it in general, and so you should totally check it out if you want to. If you guys don't know, this book follows a character named Elizabeth. Her whole life she has been raised inside of a magical library that holds grimoires. These grimoires are magical and they're able to interact with the librarians and the visitors of the library, but they're also evil. So the characters have to be super careful when dealing with these different grimoires because if you make a mistake, you can create a monster that will attack you and try to kill you. So at the beginning of the book, she is framed for something that she wasn't even a part of, and so then she has to travel to the capital and try to defend herself and try to figure out what is actually going on behind the scenes and to save the world, basically. Elizabeth also has the belief that, I guess, the librarians have that sorcerers are evil. Sorcerers are the ones that created these grimoires, and during the course of this book she has to interact with a young man sorcerer named Nathaniel Thorn, and you know, the story unfolds from there. The first thing that I really enjoyed about this book was that the setting of this book was so cool. I loved this library setting. I loved these grimoires. Some of them are hilarious. Some of them are kind of scary. So I really loved seeing these different grimoires and how they individually had powers and could interact with people and had their own desires and could also just be funny. Honestly, book lovers are gonna love settings where there's a library, and especially if it's a magical library, so I was loving all of that. One thing with that setting though, I felt like this country was very isolated. I didn't know how it interrelated with different areas around them. There wasn't a whole lot of people coming in and out of this country, so it was just kind of very, very isolated in this one section, and I thought that that was an interesting choice just because, you know, most countries are not super isolated like that. There are outside influences that challenge ideas and everything like that. There wasn't really any of that in here. And with that isolation, the society was a little difficult for me to wrap my head around. I didn't really understand how it worked. The main character, Elizabeth, has this fear of sorcerers. She thinks that they're evil, but then she interacts with the products of their sorcery all the time and loves them. Like, she loves these grimoires and she loves taking care of them. So it didn't really make all that much sense that she would be okay with these magical grimoires, but also hate sorcerers who made them. I understand why the librarians take care of these books because the knowledge that they hold is important, and it's important to preserve knowledge and preserve, you know, literature and everything like that. But it was just random when they enforced their hatred of sorcerers to when they didn't, because the sorcerers have access to these libraries and are able to check out the books and also order the books to be moved to other libraries. So they have respect for the sorcerers, but then they also hate them. And it was just very confusing on why and why they would be so deferential to these sorcerers, but then also lock them up the next time they saw them. So I also didn't understand what was going on with the power dynamics between the librarians and the sorcerers when it came to the society as a whole. Like, society thinks of these sorcerers as celebrities almost, or almost nobility in this world, but they're also evil and hated, so I didn't understand that. But one of the saving graces for this book that I absolutely loved was a character named Silas. In this world, sorcerers have to make deals with demons to be able to have their powers. Silas is the name of the demon that Nathaniel Thorn, the sorcerer, made a deal with. And I love Silas so much. I love that Margaret Rogerson never portrays Silas as like a good character. So I really loved his character. I'm like, are you evil though? Like, you may not be evil, but you're evil. I really loved Silas. Silas is the character that shines from this book. I thought that Elizabeth and Nathaniel, in comparison to Silas, just didn't hold up. Like, I cared about Silas the most, and I could take or leave Elizabeth and Nathaniel. I appreciated that Elizabeth had a lot of gumption. She definitely is a go-getter, but I just like Silas more. So when reading it, I definitely had a lot of pros, but I also had a lot of cons. So it was just like a weird, I really enjoyed certain parts of this book, but I didn't enjoy others. So I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. I definitely had a good time. I know she wrote An Enchantment of Ravens, I believe. So I might have to check that one out soon to see how it compares and see if I like that one as well. But yeah, this one I thought was solid. So those are the first 5 things that I read in 2019. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and comment down below if you've read any of these books. Do you have any recommendations based off of these that you would like to see me read? If you've read anything fantastic in the beginning of the year, let me know that as well, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye. Nikki, you want to say bye? Bye.